Thanks so much. I'm going to take John's lead and put a timer on my phone as well. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here this morning. We've talked, I feel like the flow of this is just working so well. It's lined up right from Sharon to John to myself. So I'm based in the Dublin IBM office. I'm also the studio leader. We have 60 designers who are working in this space across all of IBM. Quick disclaimer that we have to, for all of our stuff, I'm not speaking specifically as a representative of IBM's policy today, but sharing with you how we do it. So what I kind of talk about is a little bit of IBM's approach, a little bit of what some other kind of leaders are talking about in the industry that if you haven't heard of, would encourage you to look up as well. And then go into a little bit more details of what we're currently doing in our design role. So I think, as we've said, AI is the transformative technology of our time. That's not questioned, and has huge potential, right, to make positive impact. But if it's done in an ethical way. So central to everything that we do has to be trustworthiness. And that's not given to us by default, right? By regulators, by our customers, by our staff either as well. And so our approach within IBM is to balance innovation, responsibility, and trust. And for us, that means that ethics has to be anchored into our AI lifecycle. So executive summary of what I'm going to talk today is we need to, or I would encourage you all to start thinking about, if you don't already, starting to document your AI ethical approach for your company. So if I just go back there quickly, you can see that, so John has done a great job of talking about the construction sector. I'm going to go up a level and talk to you about the details and the data that we've got from company executives. And it's very similar in some ways. So as you can see, I forgot about this monitor down here. So less than 60% believe that they're ready. 72% are choosing to forego generative AI over concerns about ethics and safety. And we also know that of those who are forging ahead, 25% have actually started documenting their AI ethical approach. So why is this important? Because, as we've mentioned, AI and data are central to the transformation in this space. And globally right now, multitude of governments are looking at regulations around AI. And what this means is that there are many leaders who are stopping. They're putting the pause on because they don't know how to proceed. And they're waiting for the regulations to come through to proceed. And what we are doing in our industry, and it ties into what John was saying, is that you have to forge ahead. And how do you forge ahead with this uncertainty? And the best way to do that is to anchor in your values, your practices, and to start documenting them within your own company so that you're making decisions around where you're actually accessing data from, what are you doing with data, information for the culture of your organization, of how you access data and how it's being used to drive insights that drive the accelerated tasks that Sharon outlined previously as well. And so I think 3 in 4 companies believe that those who start documenting their AI ethics now will actually have a competitive advantage. So really the message is that there's no point in waiting until this settles down, because it's not going to settle down. I don't know if people here have heard of Amy Webb. Hands up, anyone who's heard of Amy Webb? Okay, we've got a small scattering of people. Unrelated to IBM, no connection whatsoever, but she's called a futurist. And there's a Southwest conference in Texas every year. And people line up, 4 hours in advance to try to get into our session. And what she says is that we're going through this super cycle right now where a number of transformative technologies are coming together. So you've got AI, but you've also got the wearable devices and you've got biotechnology. We've just come through a pandemic, and so people are feeling quite uncertain. And so the reason for sharing this with you is we are saying in IBM, anchor in, start making small changes, decide how you proceed, but also the futurists, the industry leaders are saying the same, that novelty is the new norm. Everything is changing all the time. And the best thing to do is start to make those tiny decisions. And I equate those tiny decisions to how are you going to use AI in your company? What data are you going to use? Do you have approval from your customers to use their data? Because it isn't just about the regulations and the governments, right, in terms of what will come ahead. And I think it's 69% of executives believe that they will receive financial penalties through generative AI adoption because they don't think that they'll be aligned when the regulations are actually published. It's not just the governments and the regulation, it's also consumers. So 57% of consumers have said that they have changed providers based on fear about their privacy and how their data is being used. And they are traditionally with sectors such as retail, insurance, and utility sector as well. So customers are looking on this and they're prepared to move based on their understanding. They are watching all of us, even if we don't realise, and they're making decisions about where they spend their money based on how transparent we are about what we're doing in their area of AI and how we're using their data. And then the third cohort are employees, staff. So there is some data as well. I think it's around 69% as well of people who are making decisions about the organisations that they want to work for based on their positive societal impact. And that, I don't know if I believe this stat, that 45% of those people would be willing to take a pay cut to make sure that they work for companies that align with their own personal values and principles. The other thing, I suppose, is maybe people have heard of Brene Brown as well, and there's quite an interesting kind of podcast series between Amy Webb and Brene Brown. She works with a lot, she's an academic, and she works a lot in thought leadership. And she said she's never seen so many CEOs and business executives really worried right now about AI, because it was good enough to be a manager before, but now you've got to be an expert in all of these new technologies. And as Sharon outlined, GenAI changes everything, right? And most people are familiar with that around OpenAI and ChatGPT. So we're in a phase now where we can really see huge productivity, not just in the work that we do for our customers, but in our own day-to-day jobs as well. They're able to potentially look at huge sums of data, as we know, and extract insights that would take months, etc. So we have this kind of intersection of huge possibility, but at the same time, huge risk. And again, the only way to traverse this really is to be really grounded and clear in what is your company about, what are the values. Ethics is not new. We've just put AI in front of it. So ethics is culture, it's practices, it's processes, it's your brand. It's how you're trusted. It's what your consumers or the general public think of you. So this AI doesn't change anything. If anything, it's just another lens that you need to apply on top of it. So we're very transparent because I guess we have to be. There's a lot of focus on the companies who are working the space of AI. And so this is the kind of staged approach that we use and that we recommend as well, in terms of putting together principles and pillars in organizational governance structure, ethics by design, so through your entire processes of how your team works, being ready. And the only way to be ready really is to have policies and framework and be nimble to what comes up, rather than reacting, right, to the potential. And then integrated governance policy. So I'm not going to go through all of those, but I think when it starts moving into my immediate role as a program director, the key thing for us in when we are focusing on new technology and new software is to make sure that what we are doing is supporting people in their jobs, in their day-to-day, and helping to provide information to them that mightn't be readily available. We talked about data. I know data is always a problem. I don't know how many years we've been trying to improve our software to get technicians to put more data into the system, right? So that we can use that data. We've been talking about this from IoT, AI applications into this whole process. So one of the areas that we've worked on and actually released last in June as our first kind of AI part to our Maximo product was what we called work order intelligence. And it was this tiny field around failure codes. So what we found is that, the data around failure codes is typically not entered. And we feel like that's key information that could start building up insights for companies as to why assets are actually going down. And it's a small icon to indicate that this is, AI piece of information. We provide a confidence score of how confident we are that it's accurate. But the key thing is that we explain to those users, in this case, the maintenance manager, how we came to that confidence level, the data that we use to calculate. They do not trust us by default. Maintenance managers, you were familiar with them, they don't want to work in technology, right? Their job is on site. And so to try and get people to actually go in and put all this data in and then trust technology that they can't see doesn't happen overnight. So the key here for us, the pillars of trust are around explainability and transparency. And that's been our experience in terms of how we communicate what we're doing. So here's an example. This doesn't apply, I guess, to us as much in terms of, this is more like consulting, right? So we don't get requests for, can you generate X, Y, Z? We work for the product team. We look at the wider market. We design and develop software for the market. But the key part that we focus on, as we've mentioned earlier, is keeping the person, the human, the user central to the decision-making process. So some of the scary stories that we hear about AI is when there is no kind of break, there is no decision point from a human, and you see scenarios where AI is making decisions that roll and roll. So here, in terms of this scenario, a request, and this is normal, right? A lot of people want to use AI to maybe productivity or to reduce staffing numbers or things like that and to automate. But the expert is the person who has the domain expertise. And AI is still learning. So you need to have a safety net in where the expert, whomever that is, your construction manager, your maintenance manager, asset manager, is reviewing what is produced. So I think John's example, he's a leader, he's an SME, he's able to assess. There was nothing that really stood out in that example that you would say that's wrong. But apply that in an enterprise scenario. Apply that when you're doing your day-to-day and making very key decisions around risk, etc. If you see anything that's untoward that you don't feel that sits right, you're not going to do it. And that's why transparency and trust are central to how we're doing it. So in this situation here, you can see use AI to aggregate data, no problem, and automate safety maintenance reviews. So the issue here is that you're automating it. And is anybody actually supervising this? Is anybody reviewing it? Is anyone making decisions around it? So these are examples where we say this is an issue, and this should be something that is built into people's AI ethics and practices of what are you going to do with AI? What are you going to do with all this information? Are you just going to use it verbatim, which alarm bells, that's not a good approach, right? Because it can contain things called hallucinations, which I think is a fantastic marketing term for a mistake, right? So we had an example last week, I think, in the campus where some of the guys were showing us latest examples. And it was a big all hands, probably similar numbers or a bit more. And they asked about James Lowe as a Leinster, probably not, not the right place to be talking about Leinster rugby players. And it had all this information about him. And in the middle, it said something about he started his career in like 2014. And most people were, I don't know, I don't know where the error is. I don't know. I can't see it. And the rugby fans were like, oh my God, he only started his career in like 2017. It's clearly a mistake. So again, I don't know. If that's my day-to-day job in terms of risk, reporting, etc., and I see an error, that's a concern for me. But as a general person who doesn't have the expertise, and I believe what that says, and it's on a topic that's far more serious, then that's the alarm bell, right? And that's why we want people to stop and start thinking about, what are you doing? There's huge opportunity. People are starting to look, but jumping straight into AI without thinking about it, without having a framework or having a culture that is communicating your organization, is probably going to lead you into a path when certain regulations are actually, published, that you could be down the wrong path, right? So that was I guess my key message at the start and the end is, please, do proceed what people are saying, look into AI, but make sure you put the fundamental pillars in place first. So this is just, I guess, to show you as well in terms of how we do it. We're an enterprise company. We're much bigger than many companies here, and we appreciate that. So we have the, I suppose, the staff, right? We have the support mechanisms to put something so comprehensive in place, and I wouldn't expect it probably at the same level, but this is something that we have to show to our customers. Our ethical approach. How do we approach designing? What are the checks and balances that we have in place? There's lots of links here as well for you to look at. I'm not going to go through them here. That's kind of not my agenda, but I wanted to, again, share them, include them, so you can take a look afterwards, see what multinationals are putting in, what they're looking at as a means to trigger thought processes for you to have conversations in your organizations. I'm not going to finish with a demo, and I wouldn't use ChatGPT because we're all bots and X, as everybody knows. But I think the key thing as well that we're doing, and we have what my exec is calling an experiment, right, for Q4. It's a new goal for Q4, right? And Q4 started last week. We, as IBMers, need to understand Gen AI and how it impacts our work so that we can have empathy with the people that we're designing, developing for. So for the remainder of the year, which we started yesterday, we opened up Watson X and we said, okay, generate user stories, right, user outcomes. How do we make sure that the software that we're actually designing is focusing on exactly what we need to be doing? And for junior designers, it's really interesting because it bubbles up. It knows asset management really well because the product's been around for a really long time, knows the industry. But what it does is it bubbles up ideas around scope that we maybe hadn't thought of. It bubbles up questions that we can then use to have a conversation with what we call our three-in-a-box, development, PM, and design, to say, hey, have we thought about this? No, that's out of scope. What should we be thinking about? So we don't take the output of what it generates and use verbatim, but it's like it's a toolkit, right? It's something we can use to start having a discussion and say, is there anything else that we're not thinking of? If it's generating some suggestions that we're saying that's completely out of scope, right? That's like phase 3 or 4 down the road. And again, we have, we're trying to lead by example, not just in the industry in terms of the various alliances or partnerships that we have, working with OpenAI as well, being very transparent about our processes. This year in August, we had our second What's the Next challenge, was where the whole company has to get involved and just figure out what Gen AI is, get uncomfortable, run different queries, figure out how to ask questions, how to do the reverse, etc., as you said. And so what we're doing is taking those tiny steps, making sure that we as individuals are not being left behind, so that when we are designing for people, we understand the uncertainty, the ambiguity, how people can approach, hey, this is changing my role as a designer, this is changing my role as a manager. How do I feel about that? And therefore, how could I better explain this and communicate it to people who are using our software? I think I'm at time, or 40 seconds over. So there's additional links here, as I said. Please take a look. Last thing. So central to our all of our programs is bringing people into the process. So we have an engagement program, a sponsored user program. We traditionally work with customers. We also want to work with, there's the alarm. We also want to work with non-customers, right? Because we are doing discovery research projects of what is a good use case? Does that make sense for them? Do our customers care about it? So there's a barcode here, similar to the Cisco one earlier. If you want to take a look, there's a couple of fields, and it comes directly to me, so I can follow up with you afterwards. That's it. Thank you.